What happens when a prince walks into America's most outspoken talk show thinking he can control the narrative, only to discover he's met his match in a host who refuses to be charmed by royal titles? You're about to witness one of the most explosive television moments ever recorded, where privilege collides with truth, and the result is absolutely shocking. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about media manipulation and royal entitlement. The atmosphere in Studio 1A was electric that morning. Whoopi Goldberg sat behind her familiar desk, her signature glasses perched perfectly as she reviewed her notes one final time. The producers had been buzzing for weeks about this exclusive interview, promising television gold. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, was scheduled to appear for what was marketed as an intimate conversation about his charitable work and recent projects. What nobody anticipated was the powder keg that was about to explode on live television. As the cameras rolled and the familiar theme music faded, Whoopi's warm smile greeted millions of viewers. Welcome back to The View. I'm Whoopi Goldberg, and today we have a very special guest joining us. Please welcome Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. The audience erupted in polite applause as Harry strode onto the set, his carefully crafted public persona on full display. He wore his trademark charming smile, the one that had disarmed countless interviewers before. "Thank you for having me, Whoopi," Harry said, settling into the guest chair with the confidence of someone accustomed to favorable treatment from the media. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, as if he owned the space. "I've been looking forward to this conversation." Whoopi nodded, her experienced eyes already reading something in his demeanor that made her journalist instincts sharpen. "Well, we're certainly glad you're here. I have to say, you've been making quite a few headlines lately, and not all of them have been about your charitable endeavors." Harry's smile flickered for just a moment, barely perceptible to the average viewer, but Whoopi caught it. "Well, you know how the media can be, Whoopi. They love to create stories where none exist. I'm here today to talk about the real work I'm doing, the impact we're making through our foundation." "Right, your foundation," Whoopi said, leaning forward slightly. "But before we get to that, I think our viewers deserve some clarity. You've made some pretty serious allegations against your own family, against the institution that raised you. Some might say you've been profiting quite handsomely from airing your family's private business." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Harry's media-trained composure remained intact, but there was a new edge to his voice. "I think that's a rather unfair characterization, Whoopi. Everything I've shared has been my truth, my lived experience. I have a right to tell my story." "Your truth," Whoopi repeated, emphasizing each word. "That's an interesting phrase. See, where I come from, truth isn't really subjective. It either is or it isn't. And when you're making accusations that can't be verified, when you're painting people as villains who can't defend themselves publicly due to protocol, well, that starts to look less like truth-telling and more like something else entirely." Harry shifted in his chair, his carefully maintained smile beginning to show strain. "I'm not sure I appreciate the implication there, Whoopi. I've been nothing but honest about my experiences." "Have you, though?" Whoopi pressed, her voice still measured, but gaining intensity. "Because honest would be acknowledging that you've built an entire brand around being the victim of the very institution that gave you every privilege imaginable. Honest would be recognizing that millions of people watching this show right now would kill for even a fraction of the opportunities you've had handed to you on a silver platter." The audience was dead silent now, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Harry's jaw tightened visibly. "I never asked to be born into that family, Whoopi. I never asked for any of this." "No, you didn't," Whoopi agreed, her tone sharpening. "But you sure did cash in on it when it suited you, didn't you? The Netflix deals, the book deals, the speaking engagements. All while playing the poor little rich boy who just couldn't catch a break." Harry's composure finally cracked. "You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what it's like to live under that kind of scrutiny, to have your every move dissected and criticized. You're sitting there in your comfortable studio, making judgments about things you couldn't possibly understand." Whoopi's eyebrows raised, and for the first time, a slight smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Excuse me? Did you just try to lecture me about scrutiny and criticism? Baby, I've been getting criticized since before you were even a thought in your daddy's head. The difference is, I didn't run crying to Oprah about it. The tension was now palpable, crackling through the television screens of millions of viewers. Harry leaned forward aggressively. This is exactly the kind of treatment that drove me away from that life in the first place. The constant attacks, the refusal to see things from my perspective. Your perspective, Whoopi said, her voice rising for the first time. Let me tell you about perspective, Your Highness. My perspective is watching you complain about a life of unimaginable privilege while there are people in this country who can't afford to feed their children. My perspective is seeing you profit off family drama while claiming you want privacy. My perspective is wondering how someone can be so tone-deaf to their own hypocrisy. Harry stood up abruptly, his face flushed with anger. I don't have to sit here and listen to this. This isn't journalism. This is an ambush. Sit down, Whoopi commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect long before Harry was born. You came on my show. You wanted to tell your story. Well, part of telling your story is answering the hard questions, not just the softball ones you're used to getting from your sycophantic American media friends. I'm not some commoner you can order around. Harry snapped, his royal arrogance finally showing through completely. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? The studio fell into stunned silence. Even the production crew, accustomed to heated exchanges on the show, seemed frozen by the naked entitlement in Harry's voice. Whoopi slowly removed her glasses, cleaning them with deliberate precision before placing them back on her face. When she looked up at Harry, her expression was one of barely controlled fury. Oh, I know exactly who I'm talking to, Whoopi said, her voice dangerously quiet. I'm talking to a grown man who thinks his title gives him the right to disrespect people who've actually earned their place in this world. I'm talking to someone who's forgotten that respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And right now, you're failing miserably at earning mine. Harry's face was now completely red, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. You wouldn't dare speak to any other member of my family this way. This is completely out of line. Your family. Whoopi laughed, but there was no humor in it. The same family you've been trashing in every interview for the past 3 years? The same family you wrote an entire book dragging through the mud? Now suddenly they're worth defending when it suits your argument? The hypocrisy is absolutely staggering. That's completely different, Harry protested, his voice rising. That was me sharing my experiences, my pain. This is you attacking me, personally for no reason other than your own agenda. Whoopi stood up now, matching his energy. My agenda? My agenda is calling out entitled behavior when I see it. My agenda is not letting privileged people come on my show and play victim while they count their millions. You want to talk about attacks? Let's talk about how you attacked your stepmother in your book, calling her dangerous and calculating. Let's talk about how you threw your brother under the bus, sharing private conversations that were never meant for public consumption. Those were my stories to tell, Harry insisted, but his voice was starting to crack under the pressure. I have every right to share my truth about what happened to me. There's that word again, truth, Whoopi said, pointing a finger at him. But here's the thing about truth, it works both ways. If you can share your version of events, then other people get to point out when your version doesn't add up. And, baby, your version has more holes than Swiss cheese. The audience was completely captivated now, phones out recording what was clearly becoming a legendary television moment. Harry looked around desperately, as if seeking support from somewhere, but found only stunned faces staring back at him. You're trying to make me look bad on purpose, he accused, his voice taking on a whining quality that made him sound remarkably childish. This isn't fair. I came here in good faith to talk about my charity work, and you've turned this into a character assassination. Character assassination? Whoopi's voice rose to a level that made the entire studio vibrate. Honey, I don't need to assassinate your character. You're doing a fine job of that all by yourself. You came on my show expecting what exactly? That I'd sit here and nod along while you spin your victim narrative? That I'd ask you softball questions about your foundation while ignoring the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room being what exactly? Harry challenged, though his bravado was clearly manufactured. The elephant being that you're a fraud, Whoopi declared, her words hitting like hammer blows. You're a fraud who's built an entire career on complaining about the very privileges that made you wealthy and famous. You're a fraud who preaches about privacy while doing tell-all interviews. You're a fraud who talks about family loyalty while betraying every confidence your family ever shared with you." Harry's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For a moment, he seemed genuinely speechless, which only made his eventual response more explosive. "How dare you call me a fraud? I have done more charitable work, more good in this world than you could ever dream of accomplishing." The studio gasped collectively. Even the cameramen exchanged shocked glances. Whoopi's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, disbelief, and finally, cold fury. "More than I could dream of accomplishing," she repeated slowly. "Let me get this straight. You think your charity work, funded by your inherited wealth and royal connections, somehow trumps decades of actual work in entertainment, activism, and social justice? You think writing checks with money you didn't earn makes you superior to someone who built their entire career from nothing?" "I've raised millions for veterans, for mental health awareness," Harry stammered, realizing he had crossed a line but unable to back down. "I've used my platform to highlight important causes." "Your platform?" Whoopi scoffed. "You mean the platform you inherited by accident of birth? The platform you only have because your grandmother happened to be Queen of England? And you want to lecture me about accomplishment when I've been fighting for civil rights and social justice since you were in diapers?" Harry was breathing heavily now, his composure completely shattered. "This is ridiculous. I'm being attacked for trying to do good in the world. This is exactly why I left England, because of this kind of treatment." "No, you left England because you couldn't handle being second fiddle to your brother," Whoopi shot back. "You left because you realized you were never going to be the star of that show. So you came to America thinking you could reinvent yourself as the victim hero of your own story. But here's the problem with that plan. Some of us aren't buying what you're selling." "You don't know anything about my motivations," Harry protested weakly. "Don't I, though?" Whoopi challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, your motivations are pretty clear. Money, attention, and revenge against a family that didn't give you everything you wanted exactly when you wanted it. And the really sad part is, you had everything. You had love, respect, privilege, opportunity, and you threw it all away because you couldn't handle not being the center of attention." Harry stood there for a moment, his chest heaving, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. The cameras captured every micro-expression, every tell that revealed just how thoroughly he had been exposed. When he finally spoke, his voice was shaking, with barely controlled fury. "I don't have to stand here and take this abuse from you or anyone else. I am still a prince, regardless of what you think, and I deserve to be treated with respect." Whoopi's response was swift and devastating. "Respect is earned, not inherited. And right now, you're acting like anything but royalty. You're acting like a spoiled child who's been told no for the first time in his life." The confrontation had reached a boiling point, with Harry's royal mask completely stripped away and Whoopi showing no signs of backing down from her relentless assault on his character and motivations. Harry's face contorted with an ugly sneer that transformed his features into something unrecognizable from the charming prince facade he usually wore. "You know what, Whoopi? This is exactly the kind of racist undertone I've been talking about. You're attacking me because you can't stand seeing a white man married to a black woman succeed in America." The studio fell into absolute silence. The cameramen stopped moving. The producers in the control room held their breath. Even the audience members who had been murmuring among themselves went completely quiet. Whoopi's expression didn't change for several long seconds, but when it did, it was terrifying in its controlled intensity. "Did you just," she began, her voice so low it was barely audible, "did you just try to weaponize race against me? Did you just try to use your wife's heritage as a shield for your own bad behavior?" Harry seemed to realize he had made a catastrophic error, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "I'm just saying that there's a pattern here. The way you're treating me, the way the British media treated us, it's all connected." "No, baby, the only thing connected here is your inability to take responsibility for your own actions," Whoopi said, rising from her chair with the slow deliberation of a predator preparing to strike. "You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic little media tour. You just tried to play the race card against a black woman who was fighting for civil rights before your wife was even born." The audience began to murmur, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Harry looked around desperately, but found no allies in the crowd that had initially welcomed him. "That's not what I meant," He backpedaled frantically. I was just trying to point out that there might be unconscious bias in how you're approaching this interview. Unconscious bias. Whoopi's voice rose to a roar. Let me tell you about unconscious bias, you privileged little boy. Unconscious bias is what made you think you could come on my show and manipulate the narrative. Unconscious bias is what made you believe your title would protect you from real questions. Unconscious bias is what made you think you could use your wife's blackness as a weapon against criticism. Harry's hands were shaking now, his carefully constructed public image crumbling in real time. I didn't mean it that way. You're twisting my words. I'm not twisting anything, Whoopi declared. I'm exposing exactly who you are underneath all that media training and fake humility. You're a coward who hides behind his wife when things get tough. You're a manipulator who thinks he can play on people's sympathy by invoking racism when it's convenient. And worst of all, you're a fraud who diminishes real experiences of discrimination by using them as a smokescreen for your own failures. This is insane, Harry protested, his voice cracking. I came here to have a civilized conversation, and you've turned it into a circus. A circus? Whoopi laughed bitterly. Honey, you brought the circus with you. You brought your victim complex, your sense of entitlement, and your complete inability to handle accountability. All I did was refuse to be your enabler. Harry looked toward the producers off camera, clearly expecting intervention, but none came. The show's staff had seen enough explosive interviews to know television gold when they witnessed it, and they weren't about to cut away from what was clearly going to be legendary footage. I want to make something very clear to you and to everyone watching, Whoopi continued, her voice carrying the weight of decades of authority. What you just did, trying to weaponize race against a black woman for holding you accountable, that's not allyship. That's not supporting your wife. That's exploitation of the very real struggles that people of color face every single day. You're putting words in my mouth, Harry said desperately. I never said anything about exploitation. You didn't have to say it, you did it, Whoopi fired back. And the fact that you can't even see how offensive and manipulative that was just proves everything I've been saying about your character. You think you can use people's pain as a shield for your own behavior. Harry's composure finally snapped completely. I don't have to listen to this anymore. I'm leaving. This interview is over. He started to storm off the set, but Whoopi's voice stopped him cold. Oh no, you don't get to storm off like the petulant child you are. You wanted to come on my show. You wanted to tell your story. Well, congratulations, you just told us exactly who you really are. Harry spun around, his face twisted with rage. And who am I exactly? According to the great Whoopi Goldberg, you're someone who had everything handed to him and threw it away because you couldn't handle sharing the spotlight, Whoopi declared. You're someone who profits off family trauma while claiming to want healing. You're someone who preaches about mental health while publicly destroying his own family's emotional well-being. And most disgustingly, you're someone who hides behind his wife's race when he gets called out for his own bad behavior. That's enough, Harry shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Whoopi. I will not stand here and be lectured by some washed-up comedian who thinks she knows better than everyone else. The insult hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The audience gasped audibly. Even the production crew looked shocked at the sheer audacity of what Harry had just said. Whoopi's expression went completely blank for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was ice-cold. Washed-up comedian, she repeated slowly. That washed-up comedian has an EGOT. That washed-up comedian has been working in this industry longer than you've been alive. That washed-up comedian built her career through talent and hard work, not by accident of birth. And that washed-up comedian just exposed you for exactly what you are on national television. She turned to address the camera directly. Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed something remarkable. You just saw what happens when someone who's used to getting their way through titles and manipulation meets someone who couldn't care less about either. This man came on my show expecting softball questions and walked away showing America his true character. Harry stood frozen, realizing the magnitude of his public relations disaster, but unable to do anything to stop it. Security, Whoopi called out calmly, never taking her eyes off Harry. Please escort our guest off the premises. This interview is officially over. Two security guards appeared from the wings, approaching Harry with professional calm. The prince looked around wildly, as if seeking some escape route, some way to salvage the situation, but there was nowhere to go. "This isn't over," he said weakly as the guards flanked him. "Oh, it's over all right," Whoopi replied. "Your credibility, your victim narrative, your ability to manipulate American media, it's all over. You just destroyed yourself on live television. And the beautiful thing is, you did it all by yourself." As Harry was escorted off the set, his face a mask of humiliation and rage, Whoopi turned back to the camera with a satisfied smile. "Well, folks, that was certainly educational. Sometimes the mask slips, and we get to see who people really are, underneath all the PR and media training." Make sure you subscribe to see more moments like this, and comment below with your thoughts on what you just witnessed. What did you think of Prince Harry's true colors being revealed?